Hey guys, welcome to the Mom Show. I'm your host, Courtney Doyle, and this is a place I am giving you permission to not have it all together. Guys, welcome back to the show. Today, my guest is Kate Battistelli, and I'm so honored that we are finally getting to connect. Like I said before we hit record, it's been 2 years in the making, and God just has orchestrated this so beautifully at this time. Kate, you have such a rich life. Quite the biography,
Yeah, it's
might I
crazy.
add. It is, and it's fun to know you and to get to meet you in person. And this season, we're doing help. I'm a mom who, if I asked you to
Mm.
fill in that blank, Kate, what would you say?
It's interesting. I have a different name than I had, not my personal name, but I never could call myself the things I can call myself now. So sometimes just being okay with that, like being an author and a speaker, I never set out to do any of those things. And it's hard for me still to say that I'm that because it just didn't ever fit in my paradigm of who I thought I was. So I know
Hmm.
that's probably not the typical answer that you get, but I don't know. Help, I'm a mom of 7 grandkids who, most of them are boys. And
Oh,
we
wow.
we only raised one girl, so yeah.
Okay.
She's very prolific in many ways, I would say.
Yes. Yes, she is. And I think she probably got that from you. Tell us a little bit about Kate
Yeah.
before Kate was mom.
Yeah, well, it's a crazy story. I was, a young woman, grew up in New Jersey, wanted to be a Broadway star. That was my whole focus in life. I knew I could sing. I knew I had a good voice. I wasn't raised in the kind of home. This is back in the 60s and 70s, and my parents were of the greatest generation, the World War II generation. So there wasn't a lot of
Mm.
affirmation like today. I see
Mhm.
how my daughter is, how we were with her, that you're gifted in this and you can change the world and God has a plan, all that stuff. I never heard any of that. So I made a lot of mistakes. At 18, I got pregnant, and that back then in the early 70s, that just wasn't something that you were proud of and that you wanted to shout to the world like they do today.
Right.
And I was terrified. I told no one except my boyfriend. Ended up having an abortion. I lived in New Jersey, had to go to New York. That was, and it was something I just tucked away. I didn't think about it.
Mhm.
I didn't talk about it. I didn't talk about it for, gosh, more than 30 years. I didn't tell my daughter till I was ready to put the story in my last book, not this current one. And it was just one of
Mm.
those things, you set it aside. But I kept going. I ended up going to 4 colleges in 2 years. I didn't graduate from any of them. So I'm a college
Wow.
dropout, but I did get on the dean's list. But I just, that college for me at that time just wasn't filling what I wanted. What I saw for myself is I have to move to New York. I have to go do what I'm gonna do. And
Yeah.
I did eventually. I got there and started going out for auditions. And one day my agent called and he said, Kate, I want to send you out to audition for the understudy for the leading lady of a big national Broadway tour of The King and I, starring Yul Brynner. You might remember who he is. Some of your younger audience are going to go, who? But if they've ever seen the Ten Commandments, he played Pharaoh. He was the original king,
Yes.
movie of King and I, the Broadway show, and he did revivals over the years. But this is in 1981. He was still a big star. So
Mm.
I ended up getting cast as the understudy, and it was amazing. I thought, this is great experience. I'll never get to go on because typically, especially at that level, I was in my mid 20s. So I thought, well, they're never going to
Mhm.
let me go on. Well, about 2 months into the run of the show, I walk in the theater one night at 7:15 for an 8 o'clock show because I was in the chorus. It didn't take long to get ready. I walk in, the stage manager runs and grabs me and he says, she's sick, you're on. And I mean, your life flashes before your eyes when that happens because this is a huge show. It's a 3-hour show, probably one of the biggest roles for a female in all of musical theater. I knew the show. I mean, you rehearsed, so I knew what I was supposed to do, but I'd never worn the costumes. I'd never handled the props. I'd never done a scene with Yul Brynner, who's very imposing. And I thought, well, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Oh
And
my
I
gosh.
remember standing in the wings before I went on because I'm the first one on the stage. And I thought, well, and I taught my daughter this over the years, said sometimes you just have to do it afraid. because you can't back
Mm.
out. There's no way to say no. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to do this. I survived. I ended up going on for her for 2 weeks, which I thought that was amazing. The leading lady had pneumonia, so I got to cover for her. And then she came back. I went back to the chorus because that's how it works. And I thought, okay, that was great. It's a credit I can add to my resume. This is a great thing. Well, about a month later, I get a call from one of the producers one morning, and he says, Kate, Mr. Brenner has sent the leading lady back to New York. He's paid her 2-year contract, and he wants you in the role. It just, I have to tell your audience that it never happens that way in theater. They're always going to bring in somebody more experienced. I mean, I knew I was good, I could handle the role, but I wasn't a seasoned actress who'd been doing this for 30 years. But I think he thought I brought a lot of youth to the show, which I obviously did. But he just liked doing the show with me. So I ended up doing it almost 3 years, about 1,000 performances. And
Wow.
the crazy part is I met my husband. He joined as the associate conductor about 6 months into the show. And I could see him in the orchestra pit because we always played really big theaters where you could see. And I thought, who's that cute guy?
Mhm.
I need to
Yeah.
check him out, find out what's the scoop on him. So,
Yeah.
we met, we literally fell in love across the footlights because I could see him down
No.
there. And it was great. So we met, we got married, but we didn't know the Lord. I wasn't raised in a home where I had a relationship with Jesus. Went to church, but
Mhm.
I didn't know the Lord. I didn't really have any interest in him. I just was doing life and I thought I was fine. But the show ended. Our show was over. We got married in July of 1983. We're living in New York. He's conducting on Broadway and Radio City, doing all these things. I'm concertizing and doing different things, still wanting to be famous. That was my goal, to win a Tony, and everyone knows my name. We had a little side business and we were being mentored by an older Jewish woman. And we found out she was a born again Jewish woman, a Messianic Jew. And she kept inviting us to church and she kept bugging us about it. We kept saying, no, no, we're good. We don't need to go to church. Well, finally, you get to that point where it's going to be rude to say no one more time if somebody keeps inviting you.
Mhm.
So we said, all right, next time, let's just get this over with. So next time we saw her, she said, you got to come Friday night. We've got this great gospel choir. You're going to love the music. So we said, okay, we will go with you. And we just wanted to be done with it so she'd stop asking us. Well, little did we know our life was going to change that night. This church was in Jamaica, Queens, and it's about a 45-minute subway from Manhattan. And so we take our the subway, and it's the last stop in Jamaica, Queens. And we get up out of the subway and we're walking, it's 2 blocks to the church, which is an old big theater. So we're walking to the church, and you can almost feel the building like pulsating with the music and with
Mm.
the Holy Spirit, which I didn't know at the time. We walk in the door of this church, and when the Holy Spirit hits you and you don't know what it is, it's pretty overwhelming. We thought we'd been dropped on a foreign planet. This was an all black holiness church where the men and the women sit on different sides of the church. The women wear dresses, no jewelry, no makeup. It's very strict. I knew nothing about that. Plus, we walk in and we see crutches hanging on the walls and empty wheelchairs, people who've been healed. And I was raised Episcopalian. None of this made sense to me. But took us, sat us in the front row. She and Mike and I were the three white faces in an all black church. And I'm pretty sure she told the pastor that we needed to be saved. It's like, you need to point this message to them because they need Jesus.
Mhm.
So, he gave a great message. The music was great. She was right. He did the altar call. I'm on one side with her. My hand went up. Mike's on the other side, not knowing that I'm raising my hand to go
Yeah.
forward. His raises, we both go forward, both receive the Lord on the same night, March 31st, 1984, in an all black church brought there by a born again Jewish woman. I mean, the whole thing, I just look at and go, Lord, this is crazy. But
Yeah.
that's how, God has his weird ways of doing things. But then we were still living in New York, still pursuing our dreams. A year after that, we had our daughter, Francesca. And a year after that, still living in New York, we're both starting to get this sense inside that
Mhm.
something here is not right. And we both realized God was asking us to lay down our careers. And I mean, that makes no sense. My husband has a doctorate. in music. You don't just, when you've worked your whole life for something, you don't just go, okay, I'm going to just walk away from that. But we knew that's what God was saying. We knew he was asking us, will you go to where I'm telling you to go? And we
Mm,
obeyed and we did, and it was, our friends thought we were crazy. And, we ended up moving back to New Jersey where we are from and starting our little home business, started homeschooling way before it was cool like it is now. It's like the in thing
yeah.
to do, but back then we didn't even have computers. Imagine how fun that was. But eventually moved down to Florida where we raised our daughter. But that's just sort of the I call it 90-degree turns. God does these twists and turns with your life if you're open to him. And he's done others too
Hmm.
that we can chat about. But yeah, that's my backstory. So
Yeah. Yeah. And you say it's a God dare that,
yeah,
leaving the stage, leaving everything that you
yeah,
felt comfortable with. What would you say to a mom who's listening and she's like, I do feel that God is nudging us to something new and something
yeah,
scary. I don't know.
yeah.
How do I do that? What
Well,
advice would you give?
yeah, and he often will. I think really the main thing is just pray. You've got to know you don't want to pick up and go and do something like say, I think our whole family's supposed to be missionaries in XYZ country. You don't want to do that unless you know that. So get
Hmm.
confirmation. Ask the Lord for confirmation. Get people to pray for you. Mature Christians that you know that will really intercede for you or go to your pastor. Just get counsel. That's my main thing because it may well be God. God will, a God dare to me is when God drops that crazy thing into your spirit that you're just going, that is so way out of my comfort zone, God. There's no way. Like
Hmm.
for me, writing my first book, it made no sense. I didn't want to write a book. I never thought that I would be an author. I mean, none of it made sense, but because God dared me and I followed through and I see the fruit of that. And he
Mm,
does it all through scripture. So I would just advise you got to pray. You got to pray like crazy so that you know that you're doing the right thing. And then don't be afraid to step out, you know?
yeah. Yeah. And I like to, open up your notes app and start paying attention to all the confirmations that you are getting because it could be a conversation with somebody, it could be a situation that you're in and God confirms this is the leading that I'm taking the journey that I'm taking you on if you'll follow my lead because he will send those confirmations when we ask for
Oh,
them
yeah.
and they can be in the most creative, of course, because
Mhm.
he's God ways and affirming ways so it doesn't feel so scary. I remember a time we were in the middle of a big transition and I was asking a friend, I was like, how do I know if I'm doing the right thing? And she was like, honestly, keep walking through the open doors
Yeah.
until there's a closed one.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Good advice.
okay, okay, we're going to do that. Every door that opens, we're just going to keep doing it. And the minute God closes the door, then we'll
Yeah.
know this was not the right path. You touched on being young, being 18, getting pregnant unexpectedly,
Yeah.
and having the abortion. What can we go back to that story for just a minute? Because I do think
Sure.
that there's a lot of listeners that are sitting with hard stories, and it doesn't
Mm.
necessarily have to be specifically about abortion,
Yeah.
but a hard story from our past. How did you get to a point of healing with that story?
It took a while. I knew at age 29 when I received the Lord, I knew he forgave me, but I couldn't forgive myself. So I sat under that weight of guilt and shame, maybe because of the generation that I was brought up in. I know today women are less guilty. They don't feel necessarily if they're in the world. I think if they're Christians, they do, but there was just that deep sense. And I thought, I can't ever tell anyone because of what they might think of me. It was all
Mm,
about how they were going to perceive me until actually I was on a podcast and the gal that was leading it was talking about her two abortions. And I thought, how do you just say that? I mean, I had
mm,
never told anyone. My husband knew, maybe a friend or two. No one in my family knew. I didn't want them to know. I was terrified if my parents found out. So for her, I just thought, people can really do that. I mean, it just shocked me. And then I realized I wrote the book called The God Dare, where I knew God was daring me to put this story in the book because I
mm,
just thought I've never told anyone, but I needed to get rid of that guilt and shame. It was weighing me down because even though the Lord had forgiven me, I hadn't forgiven myself. I didn't tell my daughter till a few months before the book came out because I thought she's got to know, but I'm so embarrassed. She's just going to lose all respect for me. Of course she didn't.
Mm.
No, those
Mhm.
we make, we build this stuff up in our head, and the Lord is just like, oh, just stop thinking that way. I was just terrified she would just have such a bad opinion of me. And of course she didn't. It was all fine. But I had to let it go myself. I had to release that shame and that guilt. And once I did that, it lifted up. I can talk about it now openly. I put a chapter in that book, and I have no problem with it. It's still something that I regret probably more than anything in my life.
Yeah.
But I want to be able to help another woman who's dealing with that. 1 out of 3 of us have had an abortion. That's a lot of
Mhm.
people. I mean, you look down the
Mhm.
row at church, you can bet there's 2 or 3 women, that have been through
Mhm.
the same thing. And if I'm not going to be honest and transparent with my life, because God has given me a position to speak to women, how can I expect them to be honest and transparent with me? Especially if
Yeah.
you're mentoring, and I like to do a lot of mentoring. That's a big thing. They have to know that I am not perfect. I have done a lot of things that I should not have done, a lot of stupid things. Even
Mhm.
being a Christian, I've done things that probably weren't in the Bible. So
Yeah.
nothing really bad. But you know what I mean? I mean, we are all sinners and we all need Jesus. And for me to not be able to share, I think is a loss, because I know people have come up to me and said, "Oh, the fact that you shared that gave me such freedom." I mean, that's all worth it. We've all
Mhm.
sinned one sin. I mean, I don't know. We just need to be transparent. If you're dealing with abortion, just know that Jesus has forgiven you. He doesn't even remember. If you're
Mhm.
forgiven, your sins are as far as the east from the west. He doesn't sit there and think about, oh, well, she did this, therefore he doesn't even remember. That's what the word tells us.
Mhm. And you said it took 30 years for you to really reconcile that healing, though,
Yeah.
that moment where I feel like you knew in your head you were forgiven, but in your
Right.
heart, you
Yeah.
weren't living forgiven. Because
Right.
I think when we do live our lives in that forgiveness, we want to share that with other people because we
Right.
want them to understand that this is not something that needs to haunt you, have you living in shame or guilt. And that was really when my story, again, I knew I was forgiven. I too
Mm.
spent probably 30 years, though,
Yeah.
with it still being a secret, even though I knew that God had forgiven me.
Right.
And I really didn't realize until all those years had passed that the secret of it was more damaging at that
Yes.
phase of my life
Yeah.
than the actual act of it all those years ago.
Yeah.
And of course, still something like you said that a terribly regret, but it doesn't have the control
Right.
and the power over me like it used to.
I think we forget that Jesus is offering forgiveness. He's got it. He says, "Here, I have it for you." We have to take it
Mhm.
as Christians. We
Mhm.
have to realize, and that's what took me so long, just to think, God, you can't really forgive that sin. And it was, yes, yes, I can. And I had to take that, and then it lifted
Mhm.
all of that, all the guilt and shame off of me.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you say to a mom though that's like, "Okay, I hear you and I've got a really hard story that I would love to tell, but what are others gonna think of me?"
I mean, we have to really not care what they think.
Mhm.
I mean, if it's a family member, like you said, with a parent or somebody, you don't want to harm them with that knowledge. Yeah, I think you have to use just some wisdom about who and how to tell. But I don't think anybody's going to think any of the less of any of us when we're honest and open, and are able to say, I made this stupid mistake, or this awful thing happened to me. Because sometimes it's not our
Mhm.
mistake. Sometimes it's
Right.
somebody doing something awful to you. And but being able to share it I think it just is all about being vulnerable and not worrying
Mhm.
about what other people think. I learned a long time ago, there was a book I saw back in the 80s that the title was "What You Think of Me Is None of My Business." And I love
Mm.
that because I'm just kind of like, I'm going to live my life according to righteous biblical principles. And if that's hard for you, there's nothing I can do. But even in terms of sharing your story, share that hard story if it's going to bless somebody else. And I think it's healing
Mhm.
for you. It really is. But
Yeah.
if it's something that you just are struggling with, get some help.
Yeah.
Find somebody either at your church or a good Christian therapist or somebody that can help you get to the point where you can live with it and not let it
Mhm.
overtake you, if that makes sense.
Mhm. How can we as women in the church be better at creating safe spaces like that? Because I think we've all
Yeah.
fall real short of creating environments where people do feel safe in sharing their hard stories.
Yeah. It's hard. I mean, we live with a lot of comparison, even in the church. You're thinking, oh
Mhm.
man, her life is perfect, or whatever we're thinking. I
Yeah.
think gossip can be a big problem. It probably depends on your church if they're a nurturing, and if they're not, I would suggest find one that's nurturing, that has community. We're blessed in our church. That's one of the things they really promote, to make friendships, to be out in the lobby, before and after church and connect with people. And I love that. I
Mhm.
think it's just finding the people that you can trust, and it's I don't know, it's just something you're going to figure out as you go, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And pray for those friendships,
Absolutely. He'll bring
and
them.
also sure, and be open when somebody is sharing their hard story. If they trust you enough to share it,
Right.
then lead into that with a lot of compassion and a lot of grace and understanding that the telling of the hard story is
Yeah.
probably
That's the hard
worse
part.
than the story itself.
Yeah, and it's judge we're not called to judge one another. We're really not called to. Listen, if they're
Mhm.
gonna judge me for my sins, nobody would talk to me, So that's
Right.
we're there to help build them up and help to restore them in any way that we can, and help to just
Mhm.
let them see that no matter what you've done, if you've repented and you're forgiven, God doesn't see any of that. He sees how he sees you, and this is hard for me to remember. My husband's always saying, Kate, if you just remembered how the Lord sees you, he sees us as
Mm.
beautiful, as his bride, as his daughters. We're his beloved. And if we remember that, that's really the only opinion that matters to me. What other
Mhm.
people think, I mean, unless I've done something really offensive and I need to be corrected in that, but otherwise, it's what God thinks of me, what Jesus thinks of me.
Mhm.
That's the only one really I need to listen to, because if I am going into error or messing up somewhere, he's going to show me. He's
Yeah.
pretty faithful to do that, to slap you when you need it.
Mhm. Mhm. How was being a mom? I know that your daughter is older now. You said you're a grandmother, so
Yep.
we're going to get into the wisdom that you have as an empty nest mom, but as Kate the mom, when you were raising your daughter, did you ever find your identity being lost in that role? I mean, you've played some pretty impressive roles in life already, and now you're mom. How was your identity in that season?
I loved being a mom. It's being in the theater and all that is a heavy burden, because you're constantly trying to be seen and noticed and improve and get better so they see you and notice you more. Not having that was a nice release for me. So I
Mhm.
actually really loved being a mom. I wanted to have a lot of kids. God gave us one, and after she was about a year and a half after she was born, I had an ectopic pregnancy, which
Mm.
put me in the hospital, nearly killed me, because it's
Oh,
you
yeah.
don't know that you're bleeding internally till you're in the hospital. But and that kind of messed things up. We tried to adopt a bunch of times, it kept falling through. I was, as a mom for a few years there, I was really mad at God because he wasn't giving me what I thought I deserved. But I finally
Mm.
matured enough to get over that. But I really enjoyed being a mom. Once our daughter was getting to the point of, the whole Nashville thing, and moving to Nashville and signing a record deal and all that, then it was easy to kind of get wrapped up in the role of not just mom, but more like a manager. And
Mm.
that we had to navigate that as things were really heating up for her, and really remember what our roles were. So we were pretty good about
Yeah.
that. But yeah, I enjoyed being a mom. For me, it was kind of a relief to let all
Yeah.
that other stuff go.
Well, it's interesting because I feel like it was probably a relief for you because you had been a performer.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think as moms, we find ourselves in performance mode. We're
Mm,
trying to be the perfect mom. We're trying to do it
yeah.
all right, and we are losing our identity in this attempt to
Mm,
do it well. And you had lived the performance life. So it's interesting that you knew what it felt like to kind of be under the gun and
Yeah.
perform and produce. And then you're like, hey, this is actually really relaxing now. I
Yeah.
don't have all these great expectations like I did on the stage. That's interesting. And your daughter did go on and
Mm.
is very successful. And so that is a different role because now you're Kate, the mom to a wildly successful artist. How has that looked?
I mean, that whole thing just amazes me, just the way God did that. I we didn't know that was going to happen. We weren't raising her to, have number one hits and win a Grammy. We really were raising her to find your path, but don't let your relationship with the Lord go. That's the primary thing.
Mm,
Maintain that, whatever roadblocks, whatever God does, whatever twists and turns it takes. That's the main thing to maintain. And I wasn't raised that way. One thing we determined when she was young is that we would speak life to her. I decided it was going to end with my generation with being criticized rather than being built up. And we
mm,
decided, you know what? We're going to speak truth, life. We're going to tell her she's a world changer because she is. Every one of
mhm,
us on this planet is, if we decide to be. We have to say
mhm,
yes to whatever it is the Lord has. But I also think because Mike and I were willing to walk away from what God had given us because we wanted it for ourselves. I just wanted to be famous. And I just imagined God saying, I couldn't use it. I couldn't take it through you, but I can take the gifts and the talents through her because she wants to
mhm,
do it for me. She wants to
mm,
worship me. And to me that's just so clear that even though it was a hard thing, God rewards obedience. He really does.
mhm,
And it takes years. I mean, I have the perspective now. I didn't have it when we walked away from New York, moved out of our apartment and moved into a house in New Jersey, but I have it today. I can see it very clearly that
mm.
obedience is honored.
Isn't that the great thing about getting further along in your walk with the
Oh, it's
Lord
the best. Years
and
give
in your parenting
perspective.
journey?
Yep,
Yes.
definitely
Yes. It's to
does.
look back
Yeah.
and go, oh, that's what you were
That's what
doing.
that was. Well, even with me dealing with infertility, I mean, literally, we tried to adopt 4 times. It kept falling through to the point it was like, I just had to go, okay, God, I guess we're having an only child, which is about 20% of families. But I look now and I think, well, had we had the 5 kids I was hoping to have, we wouldn't have had the time or the resources to
Mm,
help her as things started heating up. We couldn't have taken her to this particular conference or that conference or go to New York to do this. We wouldn't have been able to do it. Get her a really good guitar, stuff like that. We felt one of our jobs was to invest in her future to the best that we could. Well, if you've got a lot of kids, it's hard to do that to the
mhm.
extent that she needed to get where God was taking her, if that makes sense.
Mhm. No, it really does, and that really ministers to my heart. Before I pressed record, you and I were talking about my daughter being a
Yeah.
dancer
Yeah.
and really feeling like that season of her life was over and how wild that it's been.
Mhm.
Kate,
Yeah.
we didn't even go to ballets anymore. I mean, like when she walked
I
away
know.
from it, it was like, I don't ever want to see another ballet again.
Mhm.
This is done for me.
Yeah.
And for her to come this many years later and say, it's not finished, and this is what God's
Yeah.
laying on my heart. And then as he's unfolding this, so like I said before we pressed record, it feels exciting and it feels
Yeah.
scary. And so let's talk to that mom because
Yeah.
I think as moms, we have children that when they're younger, we have the dreams for them and we think we
Mhm.
know what life is going to look like.
Yeah.
A lot of situations we're comparing, well, if little
Mhm.
Susie's doing this, well, then you should be doing this.
Right.
And maybe you have that child that is a dreamer, that they're
Mhm.
outside of the box of the quote unquote normal trajectory for a kid.
Yeah.
How do we mom that kind of kid where we are encouraging them, but we're also being realistic?
Right. Well, you
It's
have to
scary to
be.
not be realistic as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's typically not going to happen the way it happened for our daughter in that world, but it can be in any world, in any occupation, whatever it is. Your child's going to grow up to be a famous heart surgeon. Who knows what it is? But
Mhm. Mhm.
um, we just really tried to just follow the Lord's leading in all of this and try, because it is easy. One thing it's easy to do when you have a gifted child like that is to make them the idol, that they become, that it's all about they need to get famous because it'll reflect well on me. That kind of
Mm,
thing. So
mhm,
we didn't want to go there. So it's that can be a struggle. But really, our goal was to raise her to find what is your purpose, do it 100%. I'm a big believer in not being afraid to dream big for your kids. Don't be afraid to dream big for yourself. And
mm,
that doesn't mean fame and fortune. I don't want people to think that, that every kid's going to go out and be the top whatever, but we can still dream bigger for them than we probably are. We see that gift and we
mm,
think, oh, no, that can't be my kid. Well, maybe it is. Don't be
mm,
afraid to at least pursue it and see, because you're going to know. I mean, you're going to know after a time that, okay, I'm going in the wrong direction. This child does not want to do this. But then sometimes, like with your daughter, it comes back around where she
yeah,
thought, okay, that's not the life for me. And then the Lord's like, yeah, it is. So you need to get back into it. And that can
yeah,
happen too sometimes. You just, I
mhm,
mean, our daughter, was it her last year of college or one of the later years in college, she felt like the Lord was telling her to just lay everything down for a semester and go work with the ministry. And I thought, "Ah, you're right in the middle of momentum. How can you do that?" But we knew it
mhm,
was the right thing. She did it and came back, and after that everything opened up because she was obedient. And it doesn't always
mm,
happen that way, but I see how that was with her, how God just he needed to make sure, I think, that she was going to follow him whatever the cost. And
mm,
she did, and I'm proud of her for doing that. I was worried at the time because once things like
yeah,
that are happening, you do start seeing it and you start getting stars in your eyes a little bit. But that the Lord had to deal with me with that too. It's just like, you know what? Whatever the Lord determines for her is going to be okay for me because it's not my
mm.
journey. It doesn't need to reflect on me.
Mm, yeah, I think that's great wisdom because I think it's really easy for us to fall into that trap.
Very easy. Yeah.
And I've said this a million times on the podcast that really either side of that can be dangerous because it may be that
Yeah.
you're falling to the pride of your child's successes and
Hmm.
or you're falling to the other side of that, maybe your child's failures and you're blaming yourself for that as well.
That's true.
And
Yeah.
it's really important for
Yeah.
us as moms to remove ourselves from
Hmm.
that throne and
Yeah.
partner with God in parenting our children and realize that his purpose for them may absolutely look completely different than our purpose and our
Definitely.
plan.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
brings us back full circle to how much do we trust him with our lives personally? And then, of course, our
Yeah.
relationship with him bleeds over into okay, well, they have to establish their own relationship and
Hmm.
we have to trust that his plan for them is really good.
Yes.
Now,
Yeah.
let's shift a little bit because you have recently written a book, The After
Ah,
Party of the Empty Nest. Mom is not your only name. Is that another book or was that the subtitle? Because I don't have the book up with
no,
me.
that's the same book. That's the subtitle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. That's what I thought. So, The After Party of the Empty Nest. Mom is not your only name. Let's talk
Mhm.
about that. Tell me what led to you writing this book you've most recently written.
Well, when Franny left home, she was, I forget, 2021, moved to Nashville. All of a sudden, I'm sitting there with an empty house. I really had never planned for the empty nest. I just never thought about it. It was like, she's always going to be here. This is how life is
Mhm.
going to be until obviously she was gone. And then I thought, well, it's really quiet. This isn't any fun. We used to do stuff together all the time, and now I'm by myself most of the time.
Mhm.
My husband typically worked from home, but during these couple years, the first couple years she was gone, he was working outside the home. So it was quiet. And
Mm.
I really just couldn't figure out what am I supposed to do with all this? Who am I
Mm.
now? Which is what a lot of moms, they get to that point, they don't understand that there's a whole second act for them. They're so stuck
Mm.
in my entire being and everything about me is wrapped up in mom. Well, but mom is not your only name. There's a
Mm.
whole, God has a whole other life. I like to ask women, what's your mom and? I'm mom
Mm.
and a nurse, or I'm mom and a business owner, or I'm mom. For me, I'm mom and an author and a speaker, which again, I told you, I never saw that coming. God pretty literally dared me to start all that. But it's figuring out what is this next season of your life going to be? Because you've probably got
Mhm.
at least a good 40 years to live, to continue on and figure out, all right, what's the other purpose for my life? Because that was a season, but it just doesn't last forever. But you don't want to get stuck there. You want to find out,
Mhm.
okay, Lord, some of you will know. There's a lot of women that already know. They're like, okay, when the kids are gone, I know I'm moving to this and I'm looking forward to it. There are a lot of moms that are kind of eager for the empty nest to
Yeah.
come.
Yeah.
And then there's ones like me that were just got stuck there. And I thought, what on earth? But one thing I did that really helped, I started volunteering. And that made a difference. I started working at a single moms ministry, and
Mm.
we were doing great work for the moms. I made great friends. It got me out of myself. And I always
Yeah.
recommend to women, do something like that. Get out of yourself. But the main thing is, if you're not quite there yet, maybe in the next year or two, you're going to have an empty nest. Start planning now for then.
Mhm.
Start praying, God, what's the next thing for me? Where do you want me to go? You might already know. You might say, I know when the kids are gone, I'm going to start that business I've always wanted to start. Well, what can you do now to prepare? What
Mm.
YouTube course can you take? What business maybe you can go volunteer for? You know what I mean? You start using the time that you have to begin preparing for that. Also, pouring into your marriage, because a lot of
Mm.
marriages fail after the kids leave home. There's a phenomenon called gray divorce, and it's growing exponentially because the kids leave and that buffer is gone. And all of a sudden, you're looking at each other going, I don't even know you. And if I don't
Yeah.
even know if I still like you, because you haven't pressed in, you haven't made that time to make your marriage the priority, because that's the
Mhm.
priority. It's God, your husband, then your kids. And if
Yeah.
we tend to put our kids, they're the ones we got to do everything. And there is a lot to do, and it is tiring. And it's like, oh, the thought of going on a date or something like that. But the more that you can just tend to your marriage, the better off you're going to
Mhm.
be when the kids are gone, because then you're going to have more time to go do stuff. Finally, we can take that trip we've wanted to take, or do
Right.
whatever it is you've wanted to do for all these years that you set aside for the kids.
Mhm.
So it's
Mhm.
the empty nest. I call it an after party because it really is. It's a
Yeah.
great time to celebrate what you did and now move to the next thing. In theater,
Right.
that's what you do. Hey, the show was great. We all loved it. We had great relationships. Where's the next audition? What's that
Mhm.
next thing I'm going to get to? So it's important as moms that we have our eye toward the future. Even if you've got little kids, start
Yeah.
thinking, start praying, start asking the Lord, okay, what's going to be the thing I'm going to be doing once they're gone?
You're so right. My husband and I have always tried to put our marriage first, and
Yeah.
with 6 children, it
Mm.
was not easy to do at all. I mean, I remember whenever they were babies, because we have 4 that were born in 5 years,
Oh my.
and yeah, and I just remember feeling so overwhelmed and thinking, and we were young in our business, and so it wasn't like we just had all this money to pay sitters, and
Right.
we were so blessed to find I did a Mother's Day out with the kids just so I could go to the grocery store or I could do Bible study. And they would go for a few hours, and we got to be really good friends with their teachers, and they were young girls, and you know I said, okay, look, I really need a sitter to come in on Saturday nights because he's blowing and going with work. I'm
Right.
blowing and going with, at the time, 5 children. This is before our
Mhm.
sixth was born. And we don't even see each other. And when we do,
Yeah.
it's just out of sheer exhaustion. And
Right.
so we made
Yeah.
it a point that we did date night every Saturday.
Good for you.
And it didn't matter whether we wanted to, whether if I didn't feel like getting dressed because it had been a really rough week, okay, well then we're not going to go anywhere we're going to go sit in the back of a movie theater where it's really dark, and we may actually sleep through that movie. It's probably a shame how many
No,
times we've paid
that's a
for a
good
really good
idea.
nap. But I
Oh, that's
do
funny.
think now, this many years into this marriage and this many kids and some of the really difficult things that we've faced as a couple, as parents and things like that, if you asked my kids, they're going to tell you that it's mom and dad. Like, we are a
Mhm.
team,
Yeah.
and so we've probably done a lot of things really wrong in our marriage, but I think that one of the things that we did right is consistently looking for ways to make
Yeah.
each other the priority, because
Yeah.
you're so right. And I do talk to young moms who will say things like, "Ah, I can't get a babysitter,
Mm,
um, this or that child just is gonna cry. They just don't want to be without me." And that may feel, in a weird way, it may feel really good and really validating that your child just loves you that
yeah,
much. But at the same time, what are you risking in your relationship with
right,
your husband? Because
right.
guess what? They do grow up and they leave.
Mhm.
And it's really hard when they leave. And I think that's such great advice to prioritize your marriage, prioritize what you said, I'm mom and
Mhm.
man, I never thought about that. And I'm challenging the listener.
Yeah,
Back up again. Listen to what Kate just said. You are mom and
yeah,
something. And
yeah.
such great advice.
Well, and also you wanna model what a good marriage looks like to your kids. You
Yeah.
wanna model
Yeah.
that, "Hey, my husband is number 1. You guys are super important, but so is he." I'm grateful to
Hmm.
see my daughter doing that. They try to have a date night every week, and with 7 kids, we're not super close to
Yeah.
them, so it's not always easy to get somebody to watch, but for the ones you were saying that, "I can't ever get a babysitter," find another couple, just switch. Just you take their kids 1 week and they take your kids another week. I have
Yeah.
a whole list of date night ideas in the book just because I don't want anybody to think they have an excuse that they can't do something, to
Mm.
maintain their marriage. Even if it's a date once a month, that's better than nothing, but make the effort to make that a priority.
I appreciate your time. And at the end of every show, I ask, is there something you're praying for right now that we could join you in prayer? And do you have a scripture that you could share with us?
I do have a scripture. My life scripture is Psalm 16, 5 through 8. It's, "O Lord, you are the portion of my inheritance and my cup. You maintain my lot. The lines have fallen the lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Yes, I have a good
Mhm.
inheritance." It just reminds me that whatever those boundary lines is that God has put around your life, they're there for a purpose. And it's a
Mm.
good purpose, even though it might not feel good right now. Those boundary lines are there for a reason. I don't know. That just has always struck me that the lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. It's even if it doesn't feel that it will eventually, but there's just a
Mhm.
reason he's surrounding your life with that boundary. So don't try to fight that. That would probably
Mhm.
be the scripture that I don't know, it's not a real popular one, but it's just from the first time I read it, I thought, "That is something I need to remember."
So beautiful. Is there something we can join you in prayer?
I'm really wanting to get this message out about the empty
Mhm.
nest. So, I mean, always, it's not, I want to sell a lot of books, but the more books you get in people's hands, the more, hopefully, the more you're be able to help them and encourage them. So, I think just this
Mhm.
message of the empty nest to really get it out there because women don't know what to do. They are confused. It's a hard transition for a lot of women. It doesn't have to be. So that'd be the main thing,
Mm.
just that God would continue to bring, like doing podcasts, being on with you, doing things like this to help get that word out. That would be the main thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like based on what you're sharing about the date night tips and things like that are in the book, you may
Mhm.
not even have to be at the stage of empty nest yet. You could
No.
totally read this book and look at how can I start preparing my heart
Mhm.
and my
Yeah.
marriage for that moment.
Yeah.
It serves both audiences really.
Yeah, and actually, I just published a devotional companion that goes with it. You can buy them
Mm,
separately, but it's a 31-day devotional with lots of journaling pages, all that kind of stuff. So it's I think, a great companion piece to the book. So those are both available.
that's wonderful. We will link all of that in the show notes, of course. Kate, thank you so much for your time. The 2 years that we waited to meet was well worth it. It's just been such a pleasure.
Well, thanks for having me. This is great.
Thanks so much for listening to The Mom Show with Courtney Doyle. Remember to check the show notes for any links, books, or resources that are mentioned in each episode. We want to be sure this blesses other mothers. And in order to do this, if you're listening via podcast, be sure that you like and share. If you could write a review, that would be fantastic. It helps us get in front of other moms. If you're watching via YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe button. This way, you won't ever miss an episode. We want to make sure that we increase our reach to other mothers who need a little encouragement, a community, and a whole lot of Jesus. We're so glad you're here.